So now we get there before the police do, and we're walking through all these vacant homes looking for Tattoo Face with shower rods, right? Just not knowing what's going to come out until the police came. And then they found him in one of the homes, and they kind of escorted him off the property and dropped him off, a few miles away. And that was the end of Tattoo Face at our park.
And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Frank, I'm going to stump you on something right away. I want you to answer this for me. What does William Shatner, Hilary Swank, Demi Moore, and Ryan Gosling all have in common?
They're all Canadian.
Close, but I wanted to relate it to what we're talking about today. They actually all came out of, at one time in their life, living in a mobile home trailer park community. I don't know if you knew that.
That is...
The list is long. And I looked through all of this. There was like Debbie Reynolds. There's obviously everybody knows Eminem. If I would hit that one, you would have claimed it right away.
Correct.
Jewel, Jim Carrey. And the list just goes on and on and on. And one of the things that I think is really great about what you do in your industry is you do such a great job of focusing on, this is not our trailer park boys kind of environment. This is not the thing where, people are going at the bottom of their life. This is where people are actually going because they want to be there. And you are such an epic proponent of community building in that space. Would you elaborate a little bit on that?
Listen, Steve, I think the most important thing that people have to understand about this space in general, because there is a bad connotation with a mobile home park or a trailer park, but these are essentially affordable housing communities, right? Where you're giving the resident an opportunity to own their home, to have that vested feeling inside that community, and have that home ownership experience while also maintaining the community at large for them. So you're creating affordable housing opportunities. It's community building 101. And it's an investment in an asset class, which does really well, but feels really well while doing it. So it serves like the best of both worlds. And for us, I mean, we couldn't pick a better spot for us to be in. And we just felt like it ticks off all the boxes to keep us, motivated and charged each day to see what can we do better.
Yeah. And this has become such an en vogue topic because, I mean, people will make it bougie just by changing the terminology around it. Instead of calling it a mobile home, you're going to call it a tiny home, or you're going to call it something else, an ADU or whatever else you might, term around it. But invariably, these smaller spaces have become extremely popular. I mean, we looked at from just the housing build out for, regular single family residential, went from these wartime homes that were like 600, 700, or 800 square feet, the homes, to now the average house that somebody wants is that 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 square foot house. And we're seeing sort of a pivot back to saying, well, maybe we don't need such big houses. And there's a lot of not just drive based on an economic desire, but based on just spatially, people just don't want big spots.
Correct. And then you have, at the end of the day, as price and cost of all these construction goods have soared, you cannot build a traditional home for the price that you could get a manufactured home. I mean, and quite frankly, a manufactured home, you're probably looking at $60 to $65 a foot. And you can't find stick built brand new at that price point. And quite frankly, the product that's put out there today by the manufacturers is so far superior than the product that it was, 30 or 40 years ago, that when the end user is in that home, you're essentially getting the same experience, right? So you're having that same experience, you're getting all the bells and whistles, but you're doing it at a much more affordable price point, while still being able to maintain, if you're in one of these communities, that community look and that community feel. So you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. And you're getting a really great product when you're buying one of these new homes from, one of these, regional or national builders.
Yeah, there's two things that you hit, and I want to kind of address both of them. The first one you hit is about that the mobile home being built, or the manufactured home being built in a world-class manufacturing facility, such that the quality that comes out of those is equal to or greater to sometimes than the stuff that's building on site. One of the things that we hit out was the idea that if I want a car, I'm not going to get a car that's, somebody's going to drive up with the parts and build it in my driveway. I'm going to get one that's built in a factory. Well, a lot of these factories now, as they're producing these homes, are becoming better than the people who are actually building it on site, because they have so much more quality control. They have so much more ability. They're not fighting with nature. They're not fighting with people not showing up every day, because they have a whole vertically integrated process. And so being able to take something that, maybe is, say, $200 to $300 a square foot to build, and driving it down to 65, and then passing that savings on to the end consumer, that creates an amazing situation for the end consumer. Now, the second thing that you hit on was the word community. And I just want to drive this home again, and I think this is something that we've talked about before, is the community that happens in these parks is very different than the community that you might have in a typical subdivision. In a typical subdivision, people drive in, the garage door opens, they pull in, the garage door closes, and never should they ever see their neighbor. But in these communities, we talked about this, is that they really actually do interface with each other, and they really have a strong sense of community and purpose with each other.
Steve, when we first experienced, my first experience in the space was 11 years ago, and you could tell the difference from other asset classes. And, I had been involved in multifamily, and we had done, condo developments and commercial. But when the resident had a feel for that park, and a lot of times when they were the residents, the long-term residents in that park, they could tell you the entire history. They were just as vested as maybe the legacy owners were. They could tell you stories of residents and when the park was in the heyday, and how things were working when things were working really well. And you could get that emotional attachment that you don't typically see in other asset classes, right? You don't see that in multifamily, where, say, an apartment building, someone's in an apartment complex, but it's transitory. They know at some point, ideally, they're buying a home and they're moving on. But when someone owns their home and they decide to be in that community, that's a decision that typically they'll hold for about 17 and a half years, right? It's not a decision that they make and they're going to change in a year or 2 years or 3 years from now. They're typically going to be there for a very long time. And that creates that sense of community. So they're just as vested to make sure that their neighbors are, maintaining their lots and making sure that they're, maintaining those community rules, if the standard's set by the community owner, right? If the standard's not set by the community owner, then it becomes, that's where the disbalance comes in. And that's where some of that, bad reputation has come in, in some towns, in some cities, about, trailer parks or mobile home parks. And that's one of the connotations that we're working on changing, because we do see this as a viable option for such a large portion of the population.
Well, absolutely. Now, one of the things I wonder about, and maybe you can answer this, is when we look at the seasonality coverage of trailer parks and manufactured homes. Are we looking at this? I live obviously up in Canada. Does this have, in the direction that you're looking at going, does this have a feasibility in all seasons in all places in North America?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to the construction standards of the homes. It goes back to the maintenance of the homes that you, as the owner of the community or the owner of the home, do. I mean, these homes they're like anything else. If you maintain it, it will last, and it'll last you through all seasons. But as an owner of communities, one of the things that we'll do, if we know that there's something that's going to potentially impact, the seasonality, whether it's a storm, whether it's a change in weather patterns, we make sure that there's an alert that goes out to our residents that, hey, there's going to be freezing temperature. Make sure that you leave a little drip in your sink so your pipes don't freeze. Especially we're in the Sun Belt, so they're not. People aren't used to having freezing cold weather like they might have in Toronto or New York.
Yep.
So it's little things like that we'll do to ensure the longevity of the asset itself. But the way these homes are constructed, they could last, for all seasons.
Yeah, and and what is sort of the life cycle of that? When you look at the depreciation on one of those properties, what typically does it take till it's a fully depreciated asset?
So, from a tax perspective or from a physical perspective?
Well, yeah, those are two very
To,
different
to,
things.
to,
How about both?
so from both. So if a new home, like a home coming off the line today, if it's maintained, I mean that home could last you 50 or 60 years easily, right? But it's like anything else, it has to be maintained. So right now we have homes that are in our portfolio or in our communities that 1980s vintage. But if they're maintained and the residents there, they own their home, they're keeping up with cool sealing the roof, they're siding their homes, they're keeping the skirting and they're dressing nice around those homes will last, and they're almost 40 years old. The homes being constructed today are even better. Now, when you said about the life cycle on it, now typically these homes, if left by themselves, they may depreciate. It's the community that really adds value. Like you could go to some high, you know, very well run communities where those homes do appreciate in value because people want to live in that community. Now,
Yeah.
from a tax perspective, what makes this such a great investment is because most of your, if you're buying a mobile home park, most of your investment isn't in a building, which depreciates over 27 and a half years, but in land improvements, which depreciates over 15 years, or personal property. You do have the added benefit of accelerated depreciation over the first few years of that investment. So that's why when you ask about this being a asset depreciation, that's one of the you know unsung benefits of investing in the mobile home park space. But it is something that obviously is a benefit for an owner who's going to be part of the process in one of these communities.
Now, one of the things I look at when you talk about the return on the investment, and we were talking about some projects, and I don't know if you can go into the details on the podcast of the project, but you were quoting some pretty impressive numbers on return in a very short period of time. You definitely need that depreciation to offset some of that profit. That's incredible. So, can you elaborate a little bit on some of these things?
Sure. I mean, we've been, like I said, we've been fortunate that we've been in this space for, we probably about 8 to 10 years now.
Hmm.
Last 8 years really focused on it. So pre-COVID, at that point, when we were acquiring these assets, typically we would look in as an entry at like almost a 10 cap, right? But for my partner and I, we tend to look at communities that need big turnarounds. Like we're kind of specialized in the trailer park turnaround. So we look at the basis of where we're acquiring these communities. And we've had a number of exits. We've had 10 exits to date. And our LPs have averaged 20% or better annualized annual return on the exit. So one, property that we just had an exit on now, we underwrite to a 5-year business model. We hit our numbers in 37 months. In 37 months, there's been, as you and I both know, there's been a change in interest rates and
It's a slight.
change in cap rates. But we hit a 22.4% annualized return for our top tier LP investors in 36 months. And we hit our target numbers where we expect to do in 60 months. We did it in 36. So we were very pleased. And now we're able to, we look at potentially being in an interest rate environment that's higher for longer. We can now kind of take that money, redeploy it into some lower basis assets and do the cycle all over again.
And was most of that return based on the improvement of the property, the capital improvement, or how much of that is cash flow? And
It's it's a combination of both. We
hmm,
believe that if we add value, we're adding value to the cash flow, right?
to the
So
cash flow, yeah.
so but what we find that we cannot add to the cash flow, right? So when you go into one of these legacy, and by that I mean like second or third generation communities that have suffered from years of underinvestment, it's tough to go in. And I've seen other sponsors come in day one. Hey, these guys are paying below market. Let's raise their rents because they're tethered to the land. And, now we don't have to do anything, but we're creating more cash flow for ourselves. That's not how we operate. We need to lead first, right? And when we, make repairs to the infrastructure, we make needed repairs to the roads, or homogenize the exterior of the home. So this way, when people come in, there's a different look and feel to the community, and helping people with their skirting or their dressing of their home. It's so they could start getting a stepped up basis, and they're comfortable with that. You don't get because you've added value to them. They understand that there's a cost to it. But it also, for us, has the added benefit of attracting new people, new residents that will come in and are willing to pay market value, which increases the cash flow for us. So for us, it's a strategy we have in place of making targeted improvements that are going to help the community, and help us drive new visitors and residents to that community that could appreciate what we've been able to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's leading by example, and I think leading by example, people can follow. When you lead by direction, then you get people who would want to fight the power, and I think that's just something that I think is a great thing. And doing those turnarounds, that I know some of your stuff produces. We'll just say it as it is. You produce great content when it comes to the turnaround stuff on your one YouTube channel, because you run into some very interesting scenarios. Very social marketing attractive stuff, and talk about some of the things that you've run into in those. That I know the list is probably long, but maybe probably definitely
probably pretty long. But we tend to look at places where other operators wouldn't look to go. I mean, to us, that's where you're finding the deepest value. Yeah. I'll give you a perfect example. We stepped into. This is, years ago, we bought a park from the bank. Bank took back the park. And most lenders, when they take back a mobile home park, they want absolutely nothing to do with it, right? And in the front of the park, there was a drug dealer with tattoos on half of his face that would drive a bike to, 5 homes that were set in the back of the park. There's 2 trap houses, one, lady of the night, and, 5 really good, clients of his. And we had to go about cleaning that park up, right? And getting rid of, Tattoo Face, because he was causing really the big problems in that community. While we evicted him, right, he was squatting in some of these homes. So as we drove into town one day and we found out that he was staying there, we had contacted the local sheriff's office, who knew us, and we were on first name basis. We explained to them what the situation was. So they told us as we got closer to call them, and they would meet us. So now we go there. It's 9:00 in the morning. We just flew in. My partner comes in, is like, we need something. Like, we're going to go there. We're going to go meet this guy. We don't know where he is. Right? So we're I'm like, what are we going to get? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like, what am I going to get? So we stop at a Dollar General, and he comes out with 2 shower rods. So now we get there before the police do, and we're walking through all these vacant homes looking for Tattoo Face with shower rods, right? Just not knowing what's going to come out until the police came. And then they found him in one of the homes, and they kind of escorted him off the property and dropped him off, a few miles away. And that was the end of Tattoo Face at our park. But the beginning of the turnaround, quite frankly. So
we're going to change your name from Frank Rizzo to Leonardo of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with your rod as you go in to get rid of Tattoo Face.
That's it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny when you watch movies and people are walking in, you're like, don't go in that room. And then you realize as you're walking down the road, you're that person in that movie with your rod thinking, I'm going into that room.
Yes, I'm going in. But at the end of the day, the rewarding aspect of it is that, when we bought that park, all the good people were inside and all the bad people were outside, right? And that's a year later. Roads are paved, the trees are trimmed back, the homes that were junked are removed, the homes that are there are cleaned up, and we show up where there's a new playground in the front. And as we're driving through the park, there's an ice cream truck with a bunch of children racing after the ice cream truck, which wouldn't have happened 12 months beforehand. And that, Steve, is a tremendously rewarding feeling, while also being economically beneficial, right? So you have the best of both worlds. It's, we were able to do something that, quite frankly, I'm proud of letting my kids know that what we were part of and sharing in that story, because it has a happy ending for the people who were impacted by the work we did.
Yeah, there's something to be said about leading investment looking for profit. And there's nothing wrong with saying I need the highest return possible. And certainly the numbers that you're talking about put that into that category. I mean, beautiful returns. But the second thing is putting your money where my saying has always been is to make money matter, you need to make money matter. And in this situation, you definitely are going in and really helping people put themselves in a position that they're supporting your endeavor, and in supporting your endeavor as the local person, they're changing the outcome for themselves, their kids, and everybody around them. And you're part of that journey. And to be part of that journey, that's a huge give. And to be rewarded for that give, I mean, you get a double whammy on that one. That is just unbelievable. It's the best of everything.
Listen, this was the best decision I've ever made, pivoting from what we were doing here locally and getting into this space was the best decision that we made career wise. And especially with everything that you see now, we're just so happy we did it. And we're so glad that we've been able to be part of this space for the last 10 years. And we're looking forward to, quite frankly, to the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of some of the things you're doing around the MHP exchange is really interesting, where it's putting a really heavy focus on not only the people who are buying and selling the units themselves, but people who are buying and selling the actual parks themselves, and having a good location to go to kind of find those facilities so that people can actually transact in this space and really put a lens down and say that there's actually a community here, there's actually a focus here, there's a market here. And I think that's something that's interesting that you've started.
Yes. And one of the reasons we did do that, Steve, is that we saw, post-COVID, all of a sudden it became, as people were chasing yield, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden people kind of rediscovered or discovered the mobile home park space, because they found out that what we saw earlier was that this is still the most fractured and mom and pop dominated real estate market in the world. It's the last uncharted or undominated by the large PE firms asset class. But with that, there's a lack of information or free flow of information out there. And some of the new sponsors or operators that came in with from a spreadsheet. This asset class looks great, but then you lose the heart and the soul of it, right? Like you kind of lose that community feel if you're just looking at the spreadsheet. So we kind of wanted to combine both of it and provide a platform where the users could get, opportunity news from across the country to find out what's happening in terms of development or legislation, education pieces to find out, best ways of operating or owning or finding or sourcing deals. And also some of the entertainment portion of it, right? So they can hear our podcast, or they can hear, like you said, some of the video that we put out on YouTube, and they could get kind of like a combination of what it is and what it takes, and create almost an indispensable tool for anybody who's interested in this space, from one level, from beginner all the way to an advanced level.
Yeah, you've got in all aspects, you've got humor, you've got drama, you've got heart, and you've got profit. I think you've got the four pillars of success when you look at the things that you're doing and all the aspects and how you interface with the market. I think that's amazing. With the MHP exchange, when people go to there, this is where people are going to list their property, where they connect to you to put the property up, or what is? Talk to me a little bit about what that is. It's like an MLS, right?
It's almost like a commercial exchange, just for mobile parks or mobile homes. So if someone had a mobile home they want to list, they have a mobile home park that's listed there, and we're starting to populate with listings across the country. They could go, they contact direct to the seller. It doesn't come to us, right? It doesn't come to us. It goes direct to the seller or to the listing agent. What we did in there is we created the first personalized AI agent specifically trained on the MHP space, and that's Chat MHP. So if you have questions, you can go there and ask your own personal AI agent any question you want about the mobile home park investing world, or how to operate a park, how to what states are the best, places to invest currently, and that could kind of filter out that information and deliver it to you. We wanted to create an experience for the user, for the enthusiast, for someone who wants to learn about the space. We wanted to give them a platform where they can get that information. And a lot of it was built on people who had asked us questions about the space. And if they want to contact us, obviously they can contact us. If they have questions on the deal, they can obviously do that. But we wanted to share some of what we loved about this space and what made it so unique, and wanted to share it with other people. And we felt that if we wanted to build our platform, we had to give somebody something to help build theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think throwing in a nice little edge around technology and an AI host, being able to give a lot of the information, because we know that a lot of the times we're answering questions with the same data all the time. And having somebody who's not going to get offended, somebody who's not going to, have a bad day, so to speak, although sometimes AI has a bad day. But the ability to be able to just have those questions answered 24/7, I think that's a fantastic opportunity.
We were very fortunate. The team that we put together to do this. Obviously, if somebody asked me to build it, I probably, good luck, right? But we were able to put together a really great team, a gentleman who's really been on the forefront of AI for the last 8 years, who got involved in the project. His name is David Barash. And he, kind of spearheaded the entire drive on it. And we were super excited to do that. And he added a completely different element, which we think will be super helpful for any user on that platform, so they could go there and they could check out, we were able to culminate a database of every mobile home park in the country. So if someone's looking for a mobile home park in North Dakota or Georgia or, Maine, they'd be able to find some information on that might be helpful in their journey. And then hopefully it can answer some questions for them and move them forward.
Now, if somebody's interested in the return, but maybe not the work of the mobile home park, because I know that's something we talked a little bit about as well when you talk about the LPs. And, they love the idea of it's a heart-based decision. They know they're making an impact in communities that need it because you're doing some really great transition work. So it's hitting the needle on that side in the big give. But the big return that's coming back is super enticing. And especially not having to put any sweat work into the work. You can carry the pole, they can carry the profit. And what would they do on that side? Would they reach out to you or?
They would reach out to us. They could contact us through the MHP exchange. They could also contact us from our company StoneCap INV. And in there, they'll also see some case studies of other assets that we were involved in. And through the MHP exchange, they could see some of the videos and hear, some of the transactions that have gone on and watch, some of the transformations take place. And then we'd have a conversation with them to see if it was the right fit for them. I mean, for some people, they want to be in the space. It's just they don't have the time, energy, and effort to do the things that we're able to do because this is all we do. And if we can, we constantly have those conversations with people to see if we can direct them in one way or the other to see if this is the right space for them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Is there anything that we haven't covered around the mobile home park that we should have covered that people need to know about it? What have we not talked about that's really important?
I think, what people have got to understand that there's a lot of people who are now becoming, MHP experts. You can hear from a lot of different people who have, been in the space. One thing I would look at, if they came in, and a lot of what's happening across what I'm saying here isn't just MHP specific. There's a post-COVID, investor, and there's a pre-COVID investor. And the post-COVID investor probably use a lot of cheap debt to acquire assets at higher or inflated prices and make sure that their underwriting wasn't based on pie in the sky assumptions. When we go back to where we just had the recent exit and we talk about where our assumptions were in 5 years, we did in 3 years, we try to take a very conservative approach to how we look at these, any opportunity, and just make sure if you're looking at different sponsors, that's one thing that you look at, time in the market, their debt coverage of what they're looking at, because I do think just in the commercial real estate market as a whole, the ticking time bomb of $1.4 trillion that has to be refinanced in the next 24 months is something that needs to be considered. And that's something that's going to affect MH, and it's going to affect, I think, all of real estate. It's something that, just a question any investor should ask.
Yeah, I think the underwriting safety guards were definitely dropped, I would say, during COVID and post COVID, where the idea of any normal, reasonable cap rate was just kind of thrown by the wayside. I'm just saying, it just anything is a good buy during that time period. And I think coming back to a little bit of reason around that and fundamentals on numbers, I think is extremely important, whether it's in multifamily or the MHP, any of those spaces need to have the fundamentals of just good math.
We could have, I'm sure Steve, same thing, with you, we could have probably acquired 4 times as many. It wasn't lack of capacity for us not to have bought more communities, and we've been to 22 of them. It was just, for us, we were very disciplined in our buy box, and we just saw deals and we just couldn't understand how they would trade at those numbers, and we couldn't make them work. And we didn't want to expand out of our comfort zone. And so during that time, our transactional volume decreased. And so we kind of flipped and we started selling into some strength, because for us that it just made sense. But now we think those opportunities are starting to open up again. And I'm sure you've seen it, deals that have just lingered around, or deals that, hey, fell out of 1, 2, 3 contracts. And now the seller's real. Like they understand there's a price adjustment. And if they want to make something happen, they've got to be at these numbers. And we're starting to see that tick up again. So for us, if we're a vertically integrated operator, we think that this is coming to a part where it's a great operator's market to find good value deals.
Yeah, and I think you used to close it off, you used a really good term, a vertically integrated operator. And I think there's so much power. I've seen this in a lot of the multifamily people I've brought on the show, where they really talk about the value of being vertically integrated. And I think you getting that as a great closing remark, I think is extremely important. Frank, I've so enjoyed our conversation and the ability to be able to jump into the MHP space. I know in Canada, there's a huge market around it. My last question to you is, when are you bringing the market to Canada?
We're going to start exploring that. I mean, we just launched the exchange in the U.S. This past week. We're looking at other markets as well, and obviously Canada will be the next on the list.
That's fantastic, because I think we definitely have a shortage of homes, especially affordable homes, and bringing a lens to this and showing that there's a strong community value. And for investors, there's a great reason to invest into the space, and bringing it all together with a slight little bit of humor, I think, is obviously an amazing thing. So totally appreciate it, my man.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And with that, guys, this is the Money, the Mindset, the Mentoring podcast. We will see you on the next one.